I look at that community, what I do when I'm speaking to that community is, just letting them know that it's a great time to start looking, great time to start thinking. You've built yourself a solid foundation, you've got yourself back on your feet. Let's take a look at what you can afford now that you've got some equity in your home. Some things may have changed with your income and your finance over these last 2 years. There might be difference when it comes to breakdowns. Sometimes the kids have grown and aged out of child support. So now they've got that extra addition in their pocket. Sometimes maybe their spouse has remarried and they're not having to pay spousal support anymore. So there's so much that can change in a year or 2 years that, I sit down with them and I rework numbers and I talk about what they can afford. And then, you know, have Shauna come into the picture as well, because now I'm able to, with the client, be able to say to Shauna, the client's permission, obviously, when we're talking numbers and finances, but
Mhm.
be able to say to Shauna, okay, you know what? The client's now in a position, this is what I've pre-qualified them for. Now Shauna's got a really good idea, and I'm going to flip it over to Shauna so she can talk about what she can do out in the market now to support, again, this client.
Yeah. And I also find sometimes clients come to me and they're like, okay, I want to buy an Abbotsford. And then they end up finding something in Chilliwack because it's more affordable. So
Right.
I always make sure I'm open-minded when somebody tells me something. And I'm like, okay, well, would you consider another city? Like I do bring that up in the conversation because that sometimes could be just that little bit extra to get them into the home that they want. And then there's clients where they're like very, very set. They're like, no way, I'm not leaving. This is the neighborhood that I want to be in. And they really narrow it down. And in some cases, I'm able to help them. In some cases, they're not in the position where they could afford what they want. So they need to continue working with Rhonda and, making sure that, whatever it is they're doing, saving money, investing, and working towards that. But ideally, the goal is to obviously get into something. But if they're already in in a home and they don't have to move, I would say stay there. If you're not if you're financially are not at that point where you can buy what you want at this point. So if there's no reason to move, then it doesn't really make sense at that point. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And, I look at us too, if both, all, both Sean and I are in different areas of finance when it comes to helping clients out. And I always look at it, like we're coaches. We're coaches in life, we're coaches in finances. And, if we're hitting a hurdle with a client, being open with each other too can always help us to steer and navigate that client into waters that are going to work for them,
Yeah.
helping them to realize that, like maybe now isn't the time to move because you're wanting to stay in the neighborhood that you're in, whether that be because it's closer to work, whether it's, you've got your networking there, whether your kids are going to school there and closest to sports. There's so many reasons why somebody wants to stay in an area that they've been in for a long time. Um, and together, Shauna and I can help them navigate through that. And maybe now is not the time to move.
Mhm.
Or if they're just really haven't had the opportunity to look in a wider space because
Mhm.
they've always been in that one area or community, we can work together too that, Shauna can take them out and show them different areas that maybe will help open their minds and they will become comfortable with that next decision. So it's very important that Shauna and I keep that communication open as well so that we
Mhm.
can help the client together to do
Yeah.
what's going to make
Eh,
them happy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I know you touched on it. I think at the end of the day, it's the lifestyle. I look at what their lifestyle is, um, because sometimes even if they say, "Oh, I want to be only in East Abbotsford," and then I try to find out, oh, why? Like, can you be a little bit further out, like another 20 minutes out? Like, is it going to make that much of a difference? And yes, in some cases it does. In some cases it doesn't. Maybe their kids have grown up now, and that they don't have their kids in baseball, hockey, and all those activities that, with all their friends in that particular area. So I do look at the lifestyle and I try to remind my clients, okay, well, now you're in at this phase, for example, like in that type of scenario. And, try to get them to envision where they want to be 5, 7 years from now, because that will help them make a decision of, where to go next. So. Definitely. I've seen quite a lot, like even multi-housing out here in Abbotsford, the zoning, and I believe in Langley is the same thing. So having it where you can have a coach house and a garden suite, all these things that you can add on to your property. Um, and also I've seen a lot of multi-generation living arrangements, like in Mission. I've seen in Maple Ridge where you can buy your lot and build a couple of properties on the lot. So I have seen a lot more of that now than I have, let's say, in the last 5, 10 years. So there's definitely been a lot of more of that going on because I do see an increasing demand for that with kids not being able to, some kids are not able to afford to buy without mom and dad. And if mom and dad are able to buy with them, it definitely benefits. Now there's the babysitter portion of it. And if mom and dad are still, healthy and are able to, are active and are able to take care of the kids while the parents are out working. So there's definitely some of that going on too, where they like, I need daycare, but I can't afford to pay for daycare and I can't afford to buy a property. But if mom and dad move in with us, we can make it happen. So there's definitely some of that going on for sure. I have worked with clients that have been in that situation for sure. So yeah.
I was gonna say that's really good to know, Shauna, exactly. And a lot of that in Langley too. They're taking these bigger lots and they're putting a second home on it or they're even subdividing because for whatever reason the bylaws don't allow you to have that second home on it. So now you take that property and subdivide it and you're still being able to solve for the outcome that you're looking for where you are close together as a family where you can support each other, as Shauna said, either by daycare, helping each other, or supporting the parents as they're getting older, um, or even getting into the market because it's so expensive now for kids to start getting into the market that sometimes that's the only option. So I'm seeing a lot more of that happening than I had probably in the last 5 to 10 years.
Mhm. Definitely in that stage where they feel like they just can't, they'll never be able to afford to buy. And I think that like it really saddens me. I actually had my friend's daughter when she was 10. She said, "Oh, I'll never be able to own a property." I'm like, this is coming from a 10-year-old. And it is instilled in some kids. They're like, "Oh, well, this is the way it's gonna be." And this is, but that doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that you'll never be able to own, that you'll never be able to do things on your own, or whatever it is that you want in your life. There's always ways, there's always solutions. You talk to the right person and you have the right guidance, you can get there. And even for me, like I didn't get into real estate till I was in my mid 20s. Had I had actually looked at buying in my early 20s, but I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have a mortgage broker. I didn't have a realtor. I didn't have anybody guiding me. And I really wish I did because I was actually able to afford something at the time. But nobody encouraged me. Nobody said to me, like, Shauna, this is possible. You can actually do that based on your current income. You're able to afford a condo. At that time, it would have been a condo. So I think it's so important having the right people guide you through the process and also understand, get to know you and understand what your needs are and what your goals are long term.
Yeah, I echo that very, very much with you, Shauna. Like, nothing changes until you make that decision that you want to make that change. But you can't always make that change on your own. But the right decision, it comes from the clarity of speaking with the right people and the team, like yourself and myself and that. And you need a safe space to talk about this. So, that's what you and I are here for. We're here to help people make that right decision. We're here for that safe space for them to come and talk to us. There's no pressures, there's no obligation. You're just looking for answers. We are here to give you those answers. So please reach out to us by all means. We work very closely. We can connect you with each other. And that's, our most important thing is that you get the clarity you need and the guidance you need to make the decisions to move forward and build your future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I find too, sometimes what forces some of these young people to actually be like, okay, I really should buy something is when they move into a place and the landlord is selling the home. And now they're like, okay, I have to move. And I've actually, because I'm a landlord myself, I've had tenants say, I have had one tenant and she said to me, Shauna, she's like, I've had quite a few times, like I'd go and rent a place and the landlord's like, okay, yeah, we're putting the house up for sale. And then they have to move because the new buyers don't want a tenant. Sometimes the buyers do want to keep the tenant, but that's not always the case. So yeah, so sometimes buyers, yeah, they get into that situation where they're like, okay, now I really should think about buying. I want that stability. And especially if you have kids, you want that stability for your kids because you want them to go to the same school. You don't want them moving around to different schools all the time because your landlord has to sell or there's issues, with you and your landlord. You want to be able to have that freedom and
Stability.
that home so you can have, you don't have to feel like you're living in somebody else's house and you could get kicked out at any time. So I think that's another side of it too for young people that I've seen where they might actually start going, okay, well, maybe I should consider, should still start looking at buying a home because I don't want to, be in that position or my kids to have to keep switching schools. So,
And that sense of ownership and sense of pride as well
yes.
with ownership is so so different, so much of a different feeling. Like you say, Shauna, like you don't want to have to be moving when you've got kids and everything else every time you turn around because maybe they're selling, maybe the landlord's decided they're going to sell the house. But the other part of that too is, home ownership, whether you're in a condo, whether you're in a townhouse, whether you're in a home, just knowing that you've got that stability and security of this is my home, I own it. If I want to put a picture up or paint a wall, I can do that. I'm going to come home every night and put my head down on my pillow knowing that somebody's not going to pull the rug out from under me and say, well, you know what, we've sold this condo. You need to be out in 90 days, 30 days, whatever it is. Um, and that pride of this is mine is so strong. And young people don't realize that they have that opportunity until they actually get in front of us.
Hmm.
And together we can make that dream a reality for them just
Absolutely.
through sharing what we know.
Yeah.